Its symptoms include impulsivity, hyperactivity, inattention, and distractibility, just to name a few. It's ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And recent numbers from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control suggest it is being widely diagnosed. In fact, the study found 11% of school-age kids were identified with the affliction. But it's not a new condition. It's been around for decades. And joining us now to tell us what's behind the surge in diagnoses, Rick Green, producer and director of Adhd and loving it. Rick also has ADHD. Dr. Russell Shacker, senior scientist in psychiatry at the Hospital for Sick Children. Dr. David Teplin, adult clinical psychologist. Dr. Albert Wong, research scientist at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, CAMH. And Ravinder Sidhu, she is a clinical psychologist at Wings Neuro Rehab. And it's good of all of you to come into TVO today for this discussion. I welcome you all. But you will forgive me if I welcome you just a little bit extra. Because Rick Green used to do TV programs here at TVO, so it's kind of sweet to see you.
A lot of people used to do them here.
I'm trying to give you a sweet, home sweet home welcome to you.
I appreciate it. It's great to see you. It's great
lovely
to be back.
Well, now that we've got started here, when did you know you had ADHD?
I got the diagnosis around the year 2000. That was my Y2K disaster, but it was a relief. It was like, everything makes sense. And so I was able to go, this is why I've written 700 episodes of radio and television, skit comedy, and finished one screenplay. And I took all the other screenplays and went, not gonna do those. What happened then was I got such resistance from people around me. What are you talking about? You're successful, you're on national television, you don't have ADHD. It's like, Richard Branson owns an airline, he's got ADHD. So I was so dismissed and kind of humiliated and angry. It stewed, and eventually with a friend of mine, Patrick McKenna, who plays Harold on the Red Green Show, co-star, he decided, or I talked to him very quickly, because he's impulsive, what the heck, into doing a documentary about him actually getting diagnosed. His wife, who's not ADHD, was alarmed and then went along with it, and it's been seen by, 5 or 6 million people, and emails come in all the time saying, you just saved my life, my child is starting to have dream they could have a life.
Well, let me pick up on that, because he was an adult when he got diagnosed, as were you.
Yeah, I was 47.
I thought this was the kind of thing that you got diagnosed when you were a kid. Not in your case, though.
No, and in fact, for adults, mine was the classic. Your kid's diagnosed, your kid's suddenly gifted, bright, suddenly struggling. They do analysis, a testing, they suggest ADHD. I'm a dad, I'm responsible, let me see the list. What's wrong with this? This is, and then everything makes sense. Suddenly you realize why you're really good at starting stuff, not finishing, why you have so much on the go, why you tune out. And you start to, as I start to learn, especially about the DRD 4.7, the first gene that was identified, thanks to some work done, partly done here at University of Toronto, but mostly University of California, Irvine, that was the first gene that was identified, suspect gene. And then I went, and I could look at my dad, I looked at my grandfather who was on the vaudeville stage. My dad stood, wrestled his change and keys as he watched TV, change channels, go upstairs, read a book, come back.
The light went on.
Yeah, and he's in sales. It was the perfect job. He's in insurance, talking to people all day long. Perfect job. And I'm in the perfect job. So when you find the right conditions, you can soar. But if you don't know what's going on and you're tuning out when your own child is pouring their heart out from you, you don't think, I wonder if I'm low on norepinephrine and dopamine. You think, I'm a bad father. So the relief, the anger, the why didn't I know sooner, it's a huge toxic mix. We're dealing with on our website on Totally ADD, people who've got the diagnosis in their 70s. They get the diagnosis, they start treatment, suddenly 6 months later their house is clean, all the clutter's gone, they're back finishing courses, the kids are coming over because they can stand being around, they can listen, they don't interrupt, and then they go, oh my God.
Life-changing.
Yeah, but what if I'd known sooner? I wouldn't have gone through 3 marriages and 4 bankruptcies, and it's heartbreaking.
Just for the record, you're not referring to yourself when you say all those things.
I've been through 1 divorce, and my finances are still a mess. I have a wife who does miracles for me, and it's the perfect match.
Well, let's find out from David Teplin then why this thing seems to be so difficult to diagnose. Here's Rick getting a diagnosis well into his 40s. How come?
Well, there are a number of reasons. First off, they've done some studies suggesting that the average adult with ADHD takes about 12.5 years to actually get the diagnosis, which means one of a few things. Either they've been misdiagnosed or the person assessing them hasn't even looked for it in the first place. The second thing, and again I'm talking as an adult clinical psychologist, is that many things can mimic ADHD, including other psychiatric disorders, medical conditions, and also even if the person should have adult ADHD, the rule rather than the exception is that if you've got ADHD, you have about a 75% chance or even more of having one or more comorbid or coexisting disorders. So it's very important that when you do an assessment that it needs to be comprehensive and that you need a lot of data points, as it were, to collect the data in terms of it being lifelong and a lifespan disorder, and also in terms of how it plays out, because ADHD is not, we're coming to understand that ADHD in fact is not one simple diagnostic term. And probably in time I wouldn't be surprised that we start to see ADHD like we did schizophrenia or mood disorders, in which they're different.
It's a panoply of things.
That's right. It's like a spectrum disorder. And so we might really talk of it as the ADHDs rather than ADHD.
I see. Okay, Ravinder Sidhu, you're also a clinical psychologist. I wonder if you could sort of add to what we just heard about whether you find it also difficult to diagnose right out the gate.
It is, and I think there are unique challenges to diagnosing it in children and diagnosing it in adults.
You do both?
Both, yes. So we do get, like Rick said, oftentimes there'll be adults who come in and they end up coming to us because their child is coming in because the teacher thought that they may have ADHD. So the child goes through an assessment and then we go and have the feedback and you're talking to the parent and then it just kind of clicks in like, I was like that as a kid, I still have problems like with all these issues, and they may not have even picked it up on their child because they think that that's normal, this is how I was, he's just taking after me, and then they start to wonder, well, maybe I have ADHD too. And they've gotten through without ever getting diagnosed.
So is this a condition that more often than not is inherited from a parent?
There is like a big heritability component with it. So like with everything, there's an interaction between the genes and the environment, but there is a large heritability component. So oftentimes when you do see children, chances are that maybe one of the parents might also have it as well, which leads to a whole bunch of other challenges. But with children, just like how Dr. Teplin said, like there are so many conditions that mimic the same symptoms of ADHD, and it's also comorbid with so many different things that you really need to talk to people in multiple contexts in the child's life. So you need to get some information from school staff, from parents. Sometimes if you have the luxury, maybe even somebody who's seen the child outside of home and school somewhere else, another family member who might know them very well.
So this is very intensive and therefore...
And see the child as well, yeah. So oftentimes, most of the assessments that I end up doing, I'll be called in for a psychoeducational assessment, for example, because the child's having learning problems. So I actually do, luckily, get to spend an entire day with this kid because we're testing for 6 to 8 hours. And so I get to see the child over the course of a school day, like starting from 9 o'clock, how do they do till 3? And the observations become really important, right? Because if in 6 hours I don't see anything in this child showing that there's any attention problems and issues, I might start to get suspicious. But chances are usually you do see some behavioral stuff and you can kind of supplement that with school records and with all kinds of information, but that's not always possible to have such comprehensive.
Well, the large numbers of these diagnoses have got some people scratching their heads, and let me go to you on this one, Russell Shacker, because a new study, as you know, by the Centers for Disease Control in the U.S. indicates nearly 1 in 5 high school age boys in the United States have received a medical diagnosis of ADHD at some point in their lives, and it's got people asking questions whether or not, contrary to Rick's background, where it was never diagnosed, are we overcompensating and overdiagnosing now? What's your view?
Well, I think we're probably overdiagnosing ADHD under some circumstances. We're probably underdiagnosing it under other circumstances, and certainly misdiagnosing it under many circumstances. The study from the Center for Disease Control, it was really just a study based on, the data is based on inquiring about whether or not a person had a diagnosis, received a diagnosis. It's not clear from that study where they got the diagnosis, how valid the diagnosis was, and I dare say there are probably many people who have been told at various times by various people that they have ADHD. Exactly how that...
For sure. In fact, long before I was diagnosed, there's an adventure with Bill, the thing I did on the Red Green Show. There's an adventure with Bill where I'd get knocked down, I get up, I try again, I mess up, I do something stupid again and again, and just keep going forward optimistically. And Red in the narration says, oh, it looks like Bill's having one of his ADD moments. And, I have family members, I won't say who, but they've said to me, Yeah, I probably am too. And they're very successful people. So it is a spectrum. And the analogy I like to use is that it's height. We all have height, right? The question is how much. Mm-hmm. And so you're a tall guy, but if I say to you, is 6'2" tall, you'd say, no, probably not. Somebody else might say, my wife would say, yeah, 6'2" is tall. If I say 6'8" is tall, you're going to agree that's tall, right? Yes. So we're all going to agree 6'8" is tall. So if you're in the top, for adults, it's 4%. If you're in that top 4% in terms of height, you're 6'5" or up. So there's nothing wrong with being 7 feet tall. But if you don't know you're 7 feet tall and you go through life hitting your head on everything, smacking doors, you go out in grade 3 to play with the other kids, to play leapfrog, and they all get hurt. Now, aggression hurt every other child, never invited to a birthday party. Mm-hmm. And ADHD kids are not popular. They don't have a lot of friends. They're struggling. This whole myth of, oh, these are creative, artistic. No, these are kids that nobody invites for sleepovers.
I want to tell Dr. Albert Wong that, yes, you do get to speak on this program. and you will...
Just enjoying the discussion.
You're enjoying the discussion, but we want to put you to work as well. And I actually want to get you to react to something that I'm going to read right now, because there's a blog written by the director of the National Institute of Mental Health, Thomas Insel, talking about the new edition of the DSM-5. This is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. This is the Bible for the people in the psychiatric world. And here's what he wrote. Control room, if you would. Let's bring this up. Unlike our definitions of ischemic heart disease, lymphoma, or AIDS, the DSM diagnoses are based on a consensus about clusters of clinical symptoms, not any objective laboratory measure. In the rest of medicine, this would be equivalent to creating diagnostic systems based on the nature of chest pain or the quality of fever. Indeed, symptom-based diagnosis, once common in other areas of medicine, has been largely replaced in the past half-century as we have understood that symptoms alone rarely indicate the best choice of treatment. Which raises a bunch of questions. Should we even think of ADHD as an illness or a disease or a condition or what? Help us on that.
Yeah, I agree generally with Tom Insel's ideas. The counterpoint to his ideas is that we do need a language to speak about what these behavioral syndromes are clinically so that we can have a common definition. So that's a semantic issue. And so the issue of whether it's being over and under diagnosed is in some ways, I don't think, the real question. Because it depends on how you set the criteria, and these criteria do change over time, and they can be applied differently in different contexts. So I think the more important point is what Dr. Insel said, which is that we in psychiatry look at clusters of symptoms or behaviors or just things that people do or the way that they act, and we give it a label, and we give them a diagnosis. But that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the way the brain works or if the brain isn't working. Of course, there are many control points in the nervous system for all kinds of behaviors. And we've picked out of these clusters of behaviors that people have certain ones that we call diagnoses, but that changes. And that is something that's driven by committees. And it's not necessarily anchored in neurobiology, and I think that's part of the issue. One of the examples that Tom Insel makes in that blog is that if we were to approach heart disease, say 200 years ago, in the same way as we are approaching diagnoses in psychiatry, we might look at people with chest pain, and if we're looking for a good measure of whether they're actually having a heart attack or not, we might try EKGs. The problem is that most people with chest pain, fortunately, aren't having a heart attack. So the problem we have in psychiatry is we look at people who have a bunch of behaviors that we can very reliably diagnose as having a certain syndrome. And then when we look to see if there's something that we can measure, something biochemical or a brain imaging test or a gene variant or something, and we see that a certain proportion of those people who present with that behavioral syndrome don't have that biological abnormality, then we say that abnormality is not very good for diagnosing the syndrome. So in other areas of medicine, we use the biological marker, that as the anchor for the diagnosis. In psychiatry, we use the syndrome as the anchor, and this leads to some sort of circular reasoning, and that's part of the problem, I think.
Well, let me follow up then. Given the way you have just laid that out, is there a danger in diagnosing people, obviously incorrectly, with ADHD insofar as these people will start to think of themselves as victims, or you're creating a pathology where none exists?
Yeah, so I think this is sort of the issue more generally of social constructs of illness as opposed to illness itself. And so sometimes, for example, it's helpful to see problems in a medical framework. And so, because sometimes that relieves the person who has that problem from some sort of blame, some kind of moral kind of accusation. So addiction's a good example of this, where over the years, addiction has been seen less and less as a moral failing and more as a medical condition. So there's certainly a utility in helping people who have this problem by giving them a diagnosis, so that perhaps more constructive ways of treating their problem can be found or initiated, rather than simply blaming them for a failure of will. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the condition is any different. It doesn't make it any more or less of an illness whether or not there is or isn't a political or social gain in creating that label or legitimizing it. So I think in some ways it's just too bad that we have difficulty in accepting and thinking about and understanding everyone's variation. That people are different, they have different tendencies, they're good at some things, not so good at other things. And it seems that sometimes we need to find an explanation for that in order to allow people to be different. But perhaps it would be maybe unrealistic, but it would be a better ideal if we could simply be more tolerant and understanding of people, of their behavior and their patterns of behavior, without there necessarily having to be a scientific explanation for why they're different.
David.
I hear what you're saying, and most of what you're saying makes total sense to me. I think as well for the viewers, what's important with any DSM diagnosis, it's never just the symptoms themselves in a vacuum. We need to also take a look at the level of impairment, the severity of impairment, how it interferes with day-to-day activities and functioning, the level of distress. Because if you just take a look at the symptoms, symptom for symptom, many folks in the population will say, absolutely, I do that sometimes, I have that sometimes. We're not talking about sometimes or occasionally. We're talking about often, very often, and we're talking about untreated, unmanaged, a very serious impairing disorder.
It can ruin your life.
Correct.
Yeah,
It can ruin your life.
These people are showing up in the doctor's office. I went in with depression. I went through bouts of depression. I also had enough anxiety, thanks Mom, to actually ameliorate me from some of the risk-taking that a lot of ADHD people do. So I was struggling. My marriage was over. And I had all of the success and felt none of it. I've made 700 episodes of television and radio, and I've watched 10.
Nominated for how many Geminis
I don't
along the
know,
way?
but
Countless.
But I never watched the programs because I always had to be on to the next. Didn't understand why. I was suffering, and I was successful on some level.
Rick, the reason why I don't like your metaphor about height is it fails to take into account the issue of impairment. And it is absolutely true that one of the reasons why the diagnosis of ADHD can be made when it should not be made is that people have not, the people who are doing the assessment have not adequately considered the presence and the type of the impairment that's associated. But the point that was made is completely clear. There's very strong evidence that if a preschooler meets this pattern of behavior, they're at increased risk for traumatic brain injury, for suffering a burn. They're at increased risk for doing badly in school, for leaving school, high school prematurely, for being underemployed compared to their non-ADHD peers, and the other consequences that you've just described.
7 times the rate of multiple car accidents, according to one study. My son got his ADHD son got his driver's license, and a month later hit a parked car in a Wendy's parking lot. A parked car, he hit it with his car. I've had 5 or 6 car accidents, all at about 5 miles an hour. Now, when we go to the go-kart track, my son and I, the ADHD brain wakes up, we beat everybody. But getting there, my wife's got to drive us, right? Because when I'm bored, I tune out.
I'm sorry, was it bad of me to laugh when you said that?
No, it's fine. That's what I do. That's the whole point of what we've been doing, is getting people to laugh at this. I don't know if there's another, like the other issue, partly why you can laugh, is every comedian I know has told me, yeah, I'm ADHD, or their kids are, and they're afraid to actually look. Everybody I know in radio, whenever I do promotion, because we talk.
So this, just so I understand this then, is this a negative thing you wish you didn't have?
No, it's a thing that completely interfered with my life until I knew what was going on, and then I had an opportunity. And that's why I use the height analogy. The height, you're right, it's not impairing, but it is if you live in a world designed for 5-foot people, and you don't know why you're hitting your head, and you smash Grandma's chandelier that Grandpa gave her, that was a wedding gift, and she is crying, and you're not invited back to Grandma's house. And when Grandma dies, you're not invited even to the funeral. And then you're 45, and somebody says you're 7 feet tall, and you go, I never got to say goodbye to Grandma, and it's painful to see.
I was going to take up the quote from Tom Insel, because I think his examples, with all due respect to him, he's a leading figure in mental health and mental health research, but with all due respect to him, the metaphor is a bit species. A better metaphor might be hypertension, which is not any more reliably assessed than symptoms of ADHD. I mean, if you take your blood pressure, if a woman takes your blood pressure, it's different than if a man takes your blood pressure. These things have been demonstrated. There's white coat phenomena where it's very difficult to get an adequate reading of somebody's blood pressure because they become anxious and it's difficult to get a valid estimate of the symptoms. But people who have hypertension, and the more hypertension they have, they are at increased risk for a variety of serious consequences. It is not a single thing with a diagnostic test at the level of some metabolic marker. It is a symptom just like restlessness and attentiveness and impulsiveness is a symptom, and no more reliable. And just like ADHD, there are endless debates about exactly where to split nature into, where to place your threshold.
How tall is tall, right?
Absolutely.
That's the question.
If you want to do a public health intervention targeting everybody at risk, you set your threshold lower than if you're trying to target people who are most affected for a different kind of intervention. And so these thresholds are flexible. When you apply that logic to ADHD, people become ballistic and very anxious because of the social, political, and other ramifications, which, by the way, are serious.
Well, let's focus on the kids here for a second, because we had, I suspect you all know him, Alan J. Francis, who's one of the authors behind the DSM-4, I think, and he was here up at Hart House at U of T actually a year ago this month, and we had him on the program, and well, let's play a clip of what he had to say, then we'll come back and chat. Roll tape, please.
The diagnosis of attention deficit disorder used to be about 3.5%. Now it's 10%. And 4% of kids in American schools are getting medication. Now, a recent Canadian study really indicates the nature of the problem. It was found that, and this is a very large number of kids in Canada, it was found that one of the strongest predictors for whether you had ADD or not was your birthday. If you were born in December, you were much more likely to have ADD than if you were born in January. The only reason for this could be the school year. That the kids who were younger in the classroom, less mature, instead of being accepted as less mature, are being medicalized as having attention deficit disorder, and all too frequently are given medication.
Medication. He's referring, of course, there, I think, Ravinder, to Ritalin. And I wonder if you could tell us, based on your experience, how safe is Ritalin?
Well, not being a medical expert, I can't really speak to like the side effects and the nature of the drug, but I do see more and more now, just because it's of the media attention and the social consciousness, people are very wary of putting their children on medication.
I wanted your view for, we'll leave the docs aside for a second.
You wanted mine.
I wanted your take on this
so
first.
I get actually both cases. So sometimes I see it actually being very effective with some of the clients who come in, and oftentimes I also see children come in who maybe have tried medication, not necessarily Ritalin, but some sort of stimulant, and then had some sort of adverse reaction, and the parents have taken them off of it or are very adamant against it. And then when you go and you see the child and you talk to the teachers and you see how much they're struggling, being able to see that even though the medication was having some possible side effects, without the medication they're clearly having a lot of other impairments, so that there may be some, benefit or some cost like benefit analysis that they can do there to try and see if there'd be some other drugs that they could use or other kinds of treatments that they can intervene. I think at some point we'll talk later about non-pharmacological treatment, so I won't get into that.
Okay, but would you,
but I do,
when Ritalin's involved, success, non-success rates, where would you put the percentage?
I'm not sure if I even know how to estimate that, but I find that most children actually, on some form or another, do actually do fairly well on the medication. Everybody. If they're not, right?
Anyone, whether they're ADHD or not, taking Ritalin.
Right.
You go to Starbucks, everybody's taking stimulant medication, and are they bouncing off the walls? No, they can sit now and actually read. When I worked at TVO, people go, I can't think straight till I have my coffee and my cigarette.
Well, hold on a second.
It's
First off, we know from the actual clinical literature that only about 75, I'm talking about adults now, I don't deal with kids, about 75% respond favorably to a stimulant. What we don't know from these figures is how well do you respond? A lot, a little bit, kind of so-so. The second thing is that, again, talking about adults, Ritalin is not as commonly used as once daily dosing, time released. The interesting thing about Ritalin, as we talked before, is that it's been around since 1937, so probably one of the longest or the oldest psychiatric drugs still being used. But I do like your point, and I'm sure others will mention it as well, is that medication for any disorder in DSM is not a panacea. Pills don't teach skills, and we know of a lot of studies, and Dr. Shaka can probably talk about this a lot better than myself. There's lots of more research that talks about even with sound medication and possibly sound treatment, there are still residual symptoms that remain impairing and impacting on a day-to-day basis. So I think we need to kind of take a good, wholesome look at the role, but we're also talking about a multimodal approach when we talk about treatment of ADHD.
Okay, Russell, you want to follow up?
Well, I think you're quite right. I think that, first off, I think in children, it's generally considered that about 75% of children and adolescents achieve a positive response to stimulant medication. That does not guarantee a altered trajectory through life. That it is rarely thought of, it should rarely be thought of as a treatment all by itself in the absence of other non-drug interventions. In fact, there's reasonable evidence that combined treatments are superior to drug alone and superior to non-drug alone as well, I might add. So those are the major considerations. In terms of safety, I think that that's an ongoing issue. I think that in clinical practice, the most common adverse effects that you notice are headaches, stomach aches, loss of appetite, and trouble falling to sleep. And that can make it impossible for about 10 or 15% of children to take stimulant medication at all. For others, they have to have an adjustment in their dose. Most people would not consider those serious, life-threatening side effects. Others have pointed to the possibility that is apparently vanishingly small, but still has been suggested to be associated with stimulant medication, which is a risk for adverse cardiovascular effects. And so it is what's called a black box warning, which means that every physician, when prescribing this medication, has to discuss this risk, because while it's extremely rare, it is obviously extremely serious.
Is that a risk in kids as well?
Yes.
It is.
Well, to be honest, the black box warning came out based on some reports through monitoring of side effects in an unstructured way, and then subsequently there have been multiple studies that failed to find this as an association. Nevertheless, the black box warning still remains. I think that, and there are many position papers, some of which I participated in, Canadian Cardiovascular Association, Pediatric Association, Psychiatric Association, etc., that have shown that it's really not a serious risk.
Let me, with you, Albert, follow up on this. 1937, you said, right, Dave, when the Ritalin was first created and then prescribed. Is the Ritalin that your profession uses today essentially the same thing that we've been using since 1937?
Yeah, I think it is. And many of the drugs that we use in psychiatry either are very old drugs or target the same neurotransmitter.
So why have we not come up with something a little different or better in all that time?
So I think that's a good question. There's a few answers for that. But first, I think I just want to comment on the sort of the issues about the use of these medications in general. And I think one point I want to make is that our view of psychoactive medications in our society seems a bit conflicted. That on one hand, if somebody has a drink before they go to a party so that they can be a bit more relaxed, or if they smoke a joint before they play the guitar, or take some E before they go dancing, we don't think that's generally okay. But if somebody's feeling depressed and they take Prozac that their psychiatrist has prescribed, or if they have ADHD and they get a stimulant to help them focus better, then we think that's okay. So I just want to kind of point out that I don't see the drugs that psychiatry that we use in clinical psychiatry as being conceptually any different than the drugs that people use recreationally. And they're just as potentially harmful when used improperly, and can just as much have side effects or be beneficial as well.
And on the issue of why we haven't got anything different in 70 years?
Yeah, I think part of it is because all the low-hanging fruit has been picked. That the drugs that directly bind to and shut off or stimulate neurotransmitter receptors, the main neurotransmitter receptors that are already there to modulate behavior and mood and so on, these have already been discovered. And now the more complicated task of finding other drug targets is kind of a categorically different problem than the original set of drugs that were first discovered. And I would also say that humanity has been very good at discovering compounds that are psychoactive. Almost all the drugs that we use today that are psychoactive are derived from some natural source. Now, of course, they've been copied and synthesized, but all the opiates, of course, came from opium. A lot of so cocaine comes from a plant. And of course, marijuana, nicotine, tobacco, these all come, caffeine, these all come from plants. So, humans are very good at finding these kinds of compounds, but in terms of actually deliberately synthesizing and refining and making new drugs that hit other targets to modulate certain kinds of behaviors or sort of psychological states, we're actually not that good at that. So I think it's basically it's a new kind of problem that we just really don't have a paradigm to solve.
Let me get your take on this, because you were on Ritalin, right?
So when I got diagnosed, I'll set this up. I've never smoked a joint. I've never done drugs. I've never smoked a single cigarette. My parents smoked like chimneys. But I was self-medicating with 5 or 6 cans of cola, which was not good for my teeth, made my hands shake, and actually
5 or 6 cans of cola a day?
A day, yeah. Well, and that's the same as 4 cups of coffee, maybe more. Chocolate as well. I was self-medicating by being in a business that's high stress and energizing and wakes me up. So when my doctor suggested you might try this, I was, are you kidding me? I don't even take aspirin when I have a headache. I was the last person. I said, I don't want to lose my creativity. And he said, well, I have a lot of very creative people. They haven't found that. What they've reported to me is they can stick with things longer, but I'm not interested in making you a busier worker bee. So anyway. So I tried it.
You put you on Ritalin?
So I tried the Ritalin.
When
I take
was
it
that,
home.
Rick?
This was 2000. So I take the pill home. I'm so scared. I break it in half, waiting for the slide get and the trip. Nothing happens. Lunch, I take the second half. Like 3 days in, I'm such a weenie. I finally take a full one. Nothing. So the 5th day, I said, I'm going to do my taxes because I'm a year and a quarter behind in my GST. I sat down, took the pill. Half hour later, started my taxes. At 11:30, I'd done a quarter. I'm only a year behind. By 1, I'd done 2 quarters. I thought, I'll take a break. And at 5 o'clock, I was only 1 quarter behind, right? And the hair went up on my neck. I went, oh my God, I couldn't even do 1 quarter. And I've done a year's worth. Now, here's what's interesting. You said pills don't build skills. A year later, I'm behind again. So the medication levels the playing field, but you got to go out and play on the field. You just got to do the things that you've got to do, right? I didn't put in place the filing system, the organizing, and so on. Now that I know what's going on, and now that my wife finally convinced me, it all goes to Peter, the accountant, and he loves adding numbers.
Okay, a follow-up here, though.
So now I'm on something. So now I'm on something called Concerta.
Okay, that's what I was. So you stopped taking Ritalin.
Yeah,
after
I was
how
on
long?
it for about 8 months until I didn't really need it anymore. I had enough systems in place, and my career kind of worked for it. And then I started on Concerta, which is a slow release, 1 in the morning because we'll forget, and it just. There's days when my wife says, did you take your Concerta this morning? What's interesting is when I started taking thyroid medication, nobody in my family was upset about that. The thyroid, well, you have your gallbladder out, sure, you got it. But I'm taking ADHD medication. Blah, 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 they said to me as they smoked it. Right? So for me, it worked. It was fine. I was one of the lucky few where right away, first dose, first time worked, and all it does is it allows me to focus more. I mean, it may do other things as well. Clearly, it doesn't stop me talking too much.
Which we enjoy here. That's okay.
All right,
That's
all right.
okay.
Actually, so as
Please.
you were talking, like with regards to the safety of the medications that are being used, that I think it's an issue generally with any psychiatric medication that it needs to be monitored properly because the effects can be unpredictable and you're changing behavior in some cases. And so it takes some time sometimes for the effects even to kind of be apparent. And so sometimes when parents come in and talk to us, what it sounds like may have happened is that whoever prescribed it, it's unclear who prescribed it or in what setting it was prescribed and whether it was being followed up on properly. And the other issue too, maybe more specific to ADHD, is that there is a potential there, like Rick mentioned, to have issues with compliance with medication because you forget to take the doses and maybe you're not taking it properly. And on the other hand, it sounds like that there might also be potential perhaps for addictive behavior, because if you're impulsive and you're not thinking about things and suddenly you start to have great effects with things, there might also be a potential for abuse that also needs to be gone and
So talk to us about alternatives.
To medication.
Yeah.
Okay. The follow-up. Actually, most of the research, the most effective treatments for AD, other than medication, really tends to be exercise and lifestyle diet changes. They have the most research support. So oftentimes, it's, we'll recommend that you need to have vigorous aerobic exercise for about half hour a day just to burn off that excess energy and help them focus better.
And no 5 Cokes a day.
And reduce the caffeine and sugar intake, because oftentimes you talk to them and they're having like 5-10 cups of coffee a day. So those are the two biggest things. And then in terms of like behavior, really a lot of what we use is behavior modification or setting up structure in the person's environment. So because the brain can't manage time or prioritize or organize, you put those things in the child's environment. So for children, it might be training parents to kind of have a lot of structure, routine, set up checklists, have visual aids and boards so that they're kind of on track and know what they're doing. Same, and coordinate with the school using a lot of like graphic organizers and that kind of thing.
What's the best exercise?
Anything that gets your heart rate kind of pumping and running around.
So
aerobic
running,
exercise.
walking.
Aerobic exercise, yeah. And then the other treatments that are kind of starting to show effect is that either you try to create the structure in the environment so that the environment is kind of regulating you, or there's some research to start supporting that there are certain treatments that can actually target cognitive skills and executive functioning skills and help the person learn how to better sustain their attention or better self-monitor. And so things like mindfulness-based, meditation-based programs, and also cognitive rehabilitation programs, the kinds that you might use with someone who has brain injury, and there's websites that do it now too, things like where you can log on and play games to improve your memory and attention.
We did on our website, we did a webinar with Dr. Lydia Zalowska down in California, who has written this book on mindful meditation for ADHD, and she led however 80 or 90 of us all over the world, Australia and Europe and everywhere, in a mindful meditation exercise. And then the comment chat stopped, and everybody did this exercise for 5-7 minutes, and then it started. Wow, different. I feel calmer, clearer. Bang, bang. And mindfulness meditation is not the staring at a candle, you're never going to shut this off, right? You're just not gonna. But what it allows you to do is to go, what is my mind going to next? So like even here, some of the practices, I'm able to go, shut up, Rick, you're talking too much, or whatever I'm catching, and and then stop looking off at the camera lights.
Well, how about we let your documentary do a bit of the talking? Can we do that?
Sure.
Okay, so you sit tight for a second.
All right.
And this is from ADD and Loving It, Rick Green's documentary. Roll tape.
Without a proper diagnosis, ADD can ruin your life.
We know for sure this is a disorder that will hurt you if you don't look after it.
Okay, having said that, the tremendous good news is if you get the diagnosis and you get proper treatment, not only can you avoid all those disasters, you can achieve spectacular success.
We also know for sure that this disorder, when looked after, can make someone very functional.
I mean, you can be at the absolute pinnacle, not only in terms of success, but happiness, fulfillment, a rich and wonderful life.
Having said that, Russell Shacker, there are those who now say we've got, and I think Dr. Russell Barkley is one of them, who are saying it's not a gift to have ADHD. It is a problem, even if you can control it, as Rick appears to be successfully doing right now.
Yeah,
most days, most of the time. This isn't something you should wish on having.
No,
Where are you on this?
I find that last clip rather offensive because it makes it sound like you can own your own airline under any circumstances, let alone if you are afflicted by ADHD.
Or have 4 Super Bowl rings like Terry Bradshaw.
Yes, correct. I think that from everything that we know, first off, ADHD is not, it doesn't mean that having a diagnosis in childhood means that you will definitely have a terrible outcome in life. It's nothing like that. But there's a very clear statistically significant relationship between having these kinds of problems in childhood and having difficulties throughout life. And to portray it this way really diminishes the difficulties that these individuals have. Sorry.
Well, it's interesting because we saw Hallowell debated Russell Barkley, and they actually, what was interesting was at the CHAD event a couple of years ago, they said actually we're saying the exact same thing. Russell Barkley says, if you don't deal with this, you are screwed. And what Hallowell is saying is, if you deal with this and manage to succeed, get it handled, you can succeed. Beyond what you, because the problem is that so many kids with it and parents, especially other kids, are so frightened that there's something seriously wrong.
David wants in here.
Well, I want to pick up on what you were saying, because I think you're on the money there. We know as well from studies that roughly 50 to 65% of kids and adolescents go on to exhibit severe ADHD symptoms in adulthood. So we know that for a whole bunch of folks, this doesn't go into remission or kind of die down. But the other thing I want to say is that because of the rule of thumb, there are different kinds of presentations. So when I talked earlier about 75% of adults having ADHD plus or minus one other condition to go along with it, I think it also depends what your comorbidity is and what your co-presentation is. Because the other thing that we haven't talked about to this point is that not everything is accounted for by ADHD. Because people still have characteristics, they have personalities, there's culture, there's subculture, there's all kinds of things that also play into it. And to kind of have one size fits all just doesn't seem realistic to me.
I want to go back to Rick, though. He just took a shot at your documentary and said you were really misleading people with that, and I want you to have a chance to take him on if you want to.
No, I think he's absolutely right. This is not a gift. But if you, it comes with certain, if you can turn around, like just, there's been a number of studies on creativity, the one just out of University of Memphis, and we score higher for creativity, and it's the same whether we're on or off medication. 30 people who were not ADHD and 30 who were. That said, being creative, great, but if you're divorced, you're bankrupt, you can't get a job, and so on, what does creativity matter? And so it is hugely painful. I mean, yeah, everybody sees me as the funny comedian. I suffered. I wish I hadn't had this. I only succeeded because I managed to compensate for some of the downside and was lucky enough to cope or find career that played to some of the upside of this, the ability to be spontaneous, to quickly move on.
But if you didn't have it, you wouldn't be who you are.
No, but if Stevie Wonder wasn't blind, would he be who he is? And he's actually, the funny thing is, he's actually said he would choose to be blind now at his point in life. And Dr. Hallowell, who is kind of at one extreme end of this is, you can turn this around. And I think it's a hopeful message. But you're right, not everyone can. If you've got ODD and other stuff going on, you're at risk.
What's ODD?
Oppositional defiance disorder. And there's, I mean, we end up in ADHD is 9 times higher in the prison population, something like that. Now that doesn't mean that
if you got it, you're going to jail.
No, because those people probably also have something else, either undiagnosed or untreated or whatever, right? Would you say? Is that fair?
Yes, I mean, obviously, you know, we all have a tremendous number of different traits. You can describe each one of us in terms of our intelligence, our creativity, our ADHD-ness, our anxiety level, et cetera, and some of those traits are less adaptive than others. And the environment certainly makes a huge difference. Some individuals are fortunate because of the circumstances that they may be born into, the opportunities that they have to channel their traits into something that's constructive, and they then can speak about these traits being positive. And others, so to use your metaphor, there are some people who are very happy that they're nearly 7 feet tall, like, right. You know, like Chera. On skates anyhow. So, but not everybody is born into those kinds of circumstances, and our healthcare system and our school system and our social safety nets are not apparently capable of responding to all of these kinds of variations and giving finding the kids who need the assistance and giving them these kinds of circumstances
Albert
that
wants
they
a
need
word.
to thrive.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that Russell made. And also, I like the analogy about height, actually. And I think that when you were speaking about the behavioral treatments, I think that's great that we're exploring other treatment alternatives, but at the same time, it also makes me think that this is why people make fun of psychiatry, because the idea that some kids should be able to sit for hours and hours in a classroom listening to a teacher mumble about British history. Without fidgeting, those are the abnormal kids, the kids that need to run around and can concentrate better after that. I mean, that to me makes sense. And the idea that we have to do all this research and come up with all these labels to finally get back to, I think, what is a fairly obvious observation that humans have known for hundreds of thousands of years, that kids need this kind of outlet. I think it just speaks to sometimes how we just lose the forest.
With just a few minutes to go here, Rick, you do point out in your documentary, and I'm going to show another clip in just a second, that you can have success, as you have, with ADHD as long as you understand it, you fit the world to you, you got the right career, the right partner, you take care of yourself. And let's focus in a little more on those 5 keys to success. We'll play this clip and we'll come back and chat. Roll tape, please.
There are many myths about ADD, and I think maybe that's the scariest, is that there are so many.
The amount of misinformation is incredible. The experts aren't sure of a lot of things, and some widely accepted theories have been shot down.
We no longer believe that ADHD is an expression of unresolved conflicts, but a frank expression of some hardwiring differences.
What we no longer believe is that people outgrow it. It continues on into adulthood.
What I learned to do in graduate school to treat ADHD, I would now consider malpractice.
Yeah,
Our understanding of this has changed that much over the past few decades.
When he said that interview, my wife was in the back co-producing, and both of us independently thought that's the opening line of the documentary. And actually, we decided not to use that as the opening. But it is changing so rapidly. The statistic I heard was 95% of what we know for sure about the human brain has been learned since 1995 because of MRI and all of the technology. But you opened by saying, this diagnosis has been around for 10 years with this name, yes. But Google Fidgety Phil, written in 1844 by a doctor. Fidgety Phil, can't sit still. It is a clinical list. Go watch The Sound of Music and listen to how do you handle a problem like Maria. It's a list. She runs with you, she whistles, she laughs, she makes us laugh, and then we find her annoying. And it is a list of, and she shouldn't have been a nun. She should have been surrounded by kids, leading them in singing and dancing in the hillside.
As she ultimately did.
And she did, and she soared. And she won probably 5 or 6 Oscars, as did the movie. It's figuring out who you are. Now, that said, the doctors see people who are struggling in ways that I can't imagine. I mean, I've met people who can't finish a sentence. Their mind is going. So this is a spectrum. There are people who are 7'6", and they're not, and height. People that tall don't live as long, and when you've got ADHD, you are really struggling.
Is our understanding of this changing fast enough to give you satisfaction on how to make people's lives better?
Well, it's interesting your comment, because back in the day I was taught, like a lot of other folks around here, that you outgrow it and basically that's the end of it, and by the time they got to adulthood, if there was a diagnosis, we called them something else. I just want to pick up on one thing, if I can, earlier that my colleague made around treatment. Working with adults and not kids, I do want to say that there's some nice evidence coming out all the time about the efficacy of cognitive behavioral therapy for adult ADHD. And the 2 things to note there is that when we treat ADHD in adulthood, we're looking at 2 things. We're looking at the level of impairment and goodness of fit and how much buffering and compensation, etc., have you done, and how you might kind of, look at all of those things. But we're also taking a look at issues that pertain to the fallout of having had ADHD your whole life, and some of the resentment, some of the grief, some of the feeling of blame, don't meet expectations, etc., etc. And that seems to be where we're also kind of heading to. The other big thing is that because of the high rates of comorbidity, oftentimes in the clinician's office, in the trenches, we're treating more than one disorder at the same time. So typically, I'm going to see folks who have got depression, anxiety, adult ADHD, and they're hooked on marijuana or cocaine. And so there really is a multimodal approach that is needed. Of course, you have to decide what do you tackle first and what do you do concurrently. And that's a discussion for another day. But that's oftentimes the reality in the trenches.
Well, I know one of the things you recommend is something that is really not consistent with somebody who wants to do well in television.
Which is?
Turn the television off.
Yeah.
You've suggested that?
Well,
not that we're urging anybody to do that right now,
it's
but
an alpha state that it puts you into. It puts you into a state of passiveness. And ADHD, see, the name's wrong. Attention deficit, it's not a deficit. When I'm working on my model railroad, my wife has to come and yell at me to come to bed, and it's 1:30 in the morning suddenly. When we're in a video game, if that's what we do, then we are locked in. Some of the ADHD doctors we interviewed once said everybody else took 6 breaks on their final medical exams over the full day. She took 2. So we can hyper-focus, right? You're watching hockey. There's ADHD in sports and athletics. There's a lot in fire and rescue. I mean, cops get into trouble when they're not on duty and when they're hanging around. When there's action and everyone else is running away in a panic and alarm, they are laser beam. I walk out on stage in front of Massey Hall in front of 2,000 people, calm and clear. I have to sit down and add up my receipts. I'm like Superman with kryptonite.
What is turning the TV?
So turning the TV off does not help. TV, it just puts you in this neutral state and it doesn't improve anything. There's one study that said every hour of watching TV lowers your happiness by 3%, and that's not ADHD, that's just a general. I say turn off the TV, get the kid magic tricks, or a Diablo, or dance lessons, or exercise class, something participatory, martial arts, focus, movement, all of those things so that rather than this having to constantly move.
And yet, Russell is, am I right about this, developing a video game to assist?
Yes,
is that contrary to what he's just suggested?
No, I'm not saying video game. Video games actually work.
It's active rather than passive.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly
okay. That's the distinction.
Well, there are a number of distinctions. I mean, I'm not as anti-television as well. Yes, I think that a lot of times children who are not well behaved and compliant and whatnot get stuck in front of a television as an alternative form of parenting. To give the parents a much needed break sometimes.
But what's the gist of your video game?
The video game, well, I think the idea is to start with an analysis of the kinds of cognitive deficits that kids with ADHD have and to build strategies to help them overcome those. That is very different than just giving them any kind of computer game to play, because those games tend to be highly arousing and not focused on the kinds of cognitive deficits that children with ADHD have and we know about. So that's the goal, is to construct the games in that way.
Rick, you host television programs. You know how to take account. I got 30 seconds left.
Thank everybody.
Well, hang on. Here's the question.
Oh, okay. Then look to camera and say next week, yes.
He remembers. I'm impressed. Are you cured?
I am struggling less. There is less disorder in my life. I still have bad days. I can still sink into it, or get lost, or get overwhelmed, or work myself into a marvelous, ugly-looking frenzy. But no, it's the level that I'm at. It was like this, and it's now like this.
Your edges are more beveled.
Yeah, and I just have more power around it. I have more access around it. There are diagnoses that you can get in mental health where it's just take the pill. This one is, the pill's really going to help, but you're going to have to develop a bunch of skills. And you want to have people around you supporting you and not afraid. And my mission is to get rid of the stigma so people at least are willing to look.
That's Rick Green. You can learn more about him and what he's been dealing with for the last many years at totallyadd.com. He's also producer and director of ADD and Loving It. Rick, great to have you back here at TVO.
Good to see you,
Thanks so much. Dr. Russell Shacker, Senior Scientist, Psychiatry, Hospital for Sick Children. Dr. David Teplin, Adult Clinical Psychologist. Dr. Albert Wong, Research Scientist at CAMH, Assistant Professor of Psychology and Pharmacology at U of T. Ravinder Sidhu, Clinical Psychologist, Wings Neuro Rehab. Great of all of you to join us today for this discussion. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.